Hi, I'm Gail Vaz-Oxlade, housing analyst and founding broker at Rationalize Realty, where I lead our team of agents in providing data-driven real estate advice to home buyers and home sellers throughout Toronto and the Greater Toronto Area. We launched this Toronto Real Estate Summit because we're getting a lot of questions from consumers about the volatility in our economy and our housing market that was brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're going to be talking to leading economists, housing industry leaders, personal finance experts, and real estate agents to get a better understanding of what's going on in our markets today and what are some of the key things that we should be looking for in the months ahead so you can all make smarter real estate decisions. If you have more specific questions about your home buying and selling needs, please feel free to email me anytime at askjohn@movesmartly.com, and I hope you enjoy this interview. Hello everyone, Gail Vaz-Oxlade here again from Rationalize Realty. Right now I have the pleasure of speaking with Gail Vaz-Oxlade. Now for those of you who don't know Gail, she's the host of Till Death Do Us Part and Princess. She's written countless financial books, including one of my favorites, Debt Free Forever. And aside from Gail's Money Masterclass, which she runs online, Gail's officially retired. And I regularly see her turning down interviews on Twitter. So we're very grateful that she agreed to speak with us today about what I think is a really, really important topic for anyone who's considering buying a home, whether you're upsizing or buying your first home. So without any further delay, let's just jump right into my chat with Gail Vaz-Oxlade. So Gail, thank you so much for joining us for our Toronto Real Estate Summit this year. I have to give you a special big thank you because I know that you said you're officially retired right now and you're only really making room for your Money Masterclass online, which is fantastic, and for our summit.
Yes.
So I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today.
Well, you're covering something I think is really important for people to hear. And so that's really why I'm doing this. You've provided a great forum for people to become more knowledgeable about something they seem to know sweet diddly squat about.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody just seems to think if you can pretend you have a down payment, then you're in.
Yeah.
And a credit score. A pretend down payment and a credit score and you're in.
Yeah.
So.
And we know it's a lot bigger than that, which is why what we're going to talk about today. And I have to confess, this is, I've been in this business a long time and I've wanted to have this discussion with you for a long time. So I feel like this conference has been the perfect setup for it. And so, you know, one of the key thing that I wanted to talk to you about today is obviously something you spent a lot of time working in with your shows. And it's really this idea that, and what I see on the ground level working in real estate, it's this idea that, you know, everyone goes into buying a home with the best intentions.
Yes.
You know, it's obviously an exciting period. You know, for a lot of people, there's a big life event happening and everyone goes in with their best intentions. It's very exciting. But despite all of people's best intentions, despite whatever planning they sometimes do, things sometimes get derailed, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, and what ends up happening, and I really kind of believe this for some people, that, you know, like the home you buy today can really be like the first step towards divorce, really. Like, you know, because
if you do it wrong, sure.
Right? Like, because it results in, you know, debt, and what you've done in your shows, like a lot of this, the financial stress that comes with being overextended and not budgeting properly. And I guess, you know, what we're going to try to talk about today, if we can, as much as possible, is how do we avoid that, or how do people avoid that? Because I really think they are just probably very similar mistakes people keep making, but they don't know what they are, or they don't think.
Totally. And the first big mistake is that the world has told everyone that if you do not have the ambition of home ownership, that you are lower than the belly of a snake. You have, you're worthless. And not everybody should own a home. It's not for everyone. There is always something.
Yeah.
This week alone, I had to have a pane of glass replaced in a large window because it broke.
Yeah.
I had to have an outside pipe replaced because the sun beats down on it and it gets tired and it starts to leak. And it's my sump pump piping, so we can't afford for that to go off.
Yeah.
Right. So this week alone, it's been like $500 worth of stuff that I had to do.
Yeah.
Now, I always plan for things that have to be maintained in the home, but maintenance is the thing nobody thinks about when they're buying a home. They're buying a home and they think to themselves, oh, I may have to build a fence, or I may have to do something with the landscaping, or maybe I have to paint, but maintenance is never at the top of people's list. And maintenance is one of the biggest things that can throw your plan awry.
Yeah, I think, and I know you've talked about this a lot. I think, of course, the financial aspects of maintenance, and what I have found sometimes, even in dealing with, sometimes we'll go and help people move, and we'll find that they're moving a year or two after they bought.
Yeah.
And even in talking to them, we find that they're just emotionally overloaded by these things, and I hear about them, and I'm in real estate, I'm used to them, things break, toilets break or whatever. But for some people, it's just like the emotional stress of it all, calling plumbers. Oh my God, there's a roof leak, and I think that is an important consideration. And I don't think that's something a lot of people think about. I mean,
no. And so, one of the things I suggest to people is that while you are still not a homeowner, if you want to become a homeowner, the best way is to practice first. And that means figuring out how much house you're going to buy. So you have to set a target for what you're going to spend and figure out what your mortgage would be. And then add in your insurance and your utilities and your maintenance and your taxes. And you come up with a number. And let's say for argument's sake, that number is $2,100. And right now you're spending $1,600 a month on rent. You have to put aside the difference between the $1,600 you're paying in rent and the $2,100 you're planning to pay to carry your home every single month. And you do that for 6 months. And if you can manage it, then we know you can manage your cash flow. But if you can't manage it, that should be a way big eye opener for you that this is not the time to buy a home.
Yeah, that's actually a smart tip. I don't think a lot of people do it. I mean, it's a smart way to save money for your down payment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. And while you're doing it, you're practicing living in a lifestyle that you're going to have, because that's perhaps the biggest flaw in the whole home ownership thing is people believe they can buy a home and nothing else in their life needs to change. They can still go out for dinner. They can still go to concerts. They can still take a vacation every year. Whatever it is that they've been doing, home ownership is just another step and nothing else changes. And that's absolutely wrong. Everything changes when you buy a home.
100%. So we talked about kind of the maintenance side and the stresses with that. So what other circumstances could you think about where you basically say to somebody, maybe you shouldn't buy, or maybe not even right now, that, is kind of the first step, I think, right?
So, principally, it's the idea of how much can I afford to squeeze my financial plan. If I take every red cent that I have for a down payment, what's that done to my emergency fund? Okay, if I've used my emergency fund money to wedge myself into a hole, things are not going to end well. If I have taken on far more of a payment than I had before, when you incorporate maintenance and property taxes and insurance, because again, people don't like to think about those things. If my costs have gone up substantially, where is there a place in my budget that I'm going to trim to come up with that extra money? It's a foresight thing. I mean, perspicacity is my favorite word. Okay. And if you are perspicacious, you are able to look at what's going on around you and see the flaws and the potentials. It's seeing very clearly what's going to happen next. Okay. But home ownership, it's like we go into it with blinders on purpose, because we don't want to consider those things, because those things may derail our plan to buy a home. And that's what we want to do. We want to buy a home. And so it doesn't matter what other things come up that would be signals to say, no, don't buy a home. If you're carrying any debt at all, any consumer debt at all, you can't afford to buy a home. I don't care if you can come up with a down payment and you can work the cash flow into your budget. The very fact that you have debt means your priorities are wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And I do think you are 100% correct that a lot of people, they don't think about the things that can go wrong, and they don't budget for the things, even though they're predictable, quite honestly. I'm super cautious and risk averse, and I always think about what's going to go wrong because I don't like stress in my life. But I think for a lot of people, thinking about what could go wrong and planning for it, it kind of adds stress, so they just ignore it. You're right, it kind of gets in the way of what they want sometimes, right? So that's a super great tip. Now, I guess when it comes to, someone's decided to buy a home, everyone prepares a budget. Okay.
No.
I will say almost all do. Some will use mental math.
I do not call that a budget.
Okay, fine.
Okay, that is wishful thinking. When you reach up into the universe and you pluck a number out of the air and you stick it in your budget and you say, oh, look, that's my budget number. That is not a budget. That is just an accident waiting to happen.
Yeah. So even the ones with the spreadsheets, many of them, I think, feel like they're doing the right budget or preparing, but they're not. Somehow I feel like maybe they're not doing it right. So what do you think maybe
they are not doing it right?
Yeah. So what are the common mistakes people are making when they're budgeting and think they're being prudent? What are they missing?
So I had a young couple just come to me. They're friends of my daughter's from when she was in high school. And now they're married and they have 2 kids and they want to buy a home, but they can't seem to get out of debt. And so they sent me their spreadsheet. And, everything was nicely itemized. But she had $400 a month budgeted for groceries. And every month she routinely spent more than $400. And that was fine because she had budgeted $400 and she was plugging in the number she was spending. So she was doing the right thing. No thought involved whatsoever. She also had a category called everything else, into which she was putting $800 a month worth of stuff. And if you try to break it out, you can't because it's just everything else. And she had budgeted $200 for everything else, but she was spending $800 in everything else. And I'm saying to her, you're crazy. This is not a budget. This is some sort of wishful thinking. Look, I'm doing the right thing, but it's not really a budget. It's just so you can pat yourself on the back and say, I have a spreadsheet, because you're not actually paying attention to what the spreadsheet is telling you.
Yeah.
You can't just plug the numbers into the spreadsheet. You have to actually analyze what it means. And so if you get to the end of the month and you find that, you're spending $700 a month on groceries, not $400 a month on groceries, change the number. But that means you have to go cut numbers out somewhere else. And that's what people don't want to do. So they'd rather be blindsided than actually work with a budget that actually balances. And so my whole thing is you have to have a budget that balances.
I wonder, just working with people and talking to them, I wonder how many people that are buying homes actually check to see where they spend their money. Everyone comes in with the budget, right? I don't think, and I could be wrong, I'm not, I don't really analyze everything they do, but I don't think many have reconciled it to say, am I spending $400 a month on food? Am I spending this much a month on entertainment or travel or whatever? And I do wonder how much of that leads to their problems. It's like their budget is how much they think they should be spending on stuff versus what they actually spend.
So I will tell you that in 14 seasons of Till Death Do Us Part, 3.5 seasons of Princess, and 2 seasons of Money Moron, I met one person who knew what they were spending. And the reason we did the show with them was because her husband was convinced she was mismanaging the money. Because she was always saying to him, we don't have money for that. He made over $100,000 a year. He couldn't understand, if I make over $100,000 a year, how can we not have money? Right? Because it sounds like a big number. It's not a big number anymore.
No.
Okay, you take the tax off, First of all, you don't make $100,000. You and the government make $100,000. Okay,
Yeah.
you have to always work with your net. But she was the only person in that whole time. We're talking years and years and hundreds of people. Okay, that ever had a balance sheet that actually worked. So I would say to you, maybe 1 in every 300 people actually do the spending analysis.
Interesting. So I guess if you're that home buyer then that's making the budget, then it sounds like the next first step after that is to download a year's worth of your spending and see if it matches, I would think.
So I tell people 6 months. You have
Okay.
to leave Christmas out.
Yep.
And if you have a wacky month, you can't just leave it out because it's a wacky month, because there are wacky months all the time.
Yeah.
So you have to take any 6-month period. And it's interesting because this is going to be the Money Masterclass challenge for August.
Okay.
And we'll see how many people drop out at that point.
Oh.
Because nobody likes doing the spending analysis.
I
And I waited till August to introduce it because nobody likes doing the spending analysis.
Interesting. Is it, with all these tools online, it should be pretty easy to do. Like, do people not like to do it because they don't want to see where they spend their money? Is that what it is?
That's it, exactly. So, you know, it was interesting. When we did the TV show, we used to set up this big screen and we had to position everybody around it so the cameras can catch it properly.
Okay.
And we would always say to whoever we were working with, don't move. You have to stay where you are. And halfway through the screens, we'd have to stop and move everybody back into position because they'd all backed away from the screen while I was showing them what they were spending money on. And I would say, you know, we went shopping on the first, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and they would be back in the kitchen, okay?
Yeah.
So people don't want to see what they're doing because to acknowledge what's wrong would require change, and they really don't want to give up their coffee, or they really don't want to give up the gym, or they really don't want to give up going out with their friends 3 nights a week.
Yeah, that's interesting. So that's one barrier when people are buying homes when it comes to budgeting.
Yes.
I wonder how much the other challenge is that for some people, I wonder, especially if like you're a couple and you're planning on having kids, you know, budgeting for not what you spend today, but for what you might spend 2 years from now.
Yes.
Right. And I wonder how common that is. I don't know how and how that presents a problem in their finances in the future. Maybe that's one of the reasons that it results in.
It's also a huge problem. And it's one of the reasons why I say to people, if you don't have a 20% down payment, I don't care what's available to you. If you don't have a 20% down payment, you're not showing enough interest in owning a home.
Interesting.
So I've never bought a home with less than 20% down, ever. And I can't imagine why anybody would choose to pay CMHC insurance. Because really what you're doing is you're covering the bank's butt.
Yeah.
Okay, whoever your mortgage lender is, all you're doing is covering their butt. It's not your butt, it's their butt.
Yeah.
So why would you do that? And if you can't save, you know, but there's always been this anxiety, but if I don't buy now, house prices are going to go so far up, I'm never going to be able to buy. Well, you can buy now and then have the crunch come and get you. And then we'll see how comfortable you are with the fact that you squeezed yourself into a house.
Yeah.
So my first rule is you have to have 20% down. And I don't want to hear from all the people who said, well, I didn't put 20% down. I only put 10% down. Amount of my house is worth this much. Listen, your house is worth what you paid for it until the day you sell it. Okay?
Yep. 100%. I mean, I do think that there is this, I don't know, like a rite of passage that has kind of gone now, and when they made money so easy to actually save for a down payment. Because I do think it builds some financial discipline, like your exercise of thinking about how much you're going to spend on your housing and setting that money aside.
Yes.
I think it just builds a financial discipline that you need when you own a home, because again, you have to be a little bit more disciplined.
Absolutely. And this whole idea about having children, you know, so people squeeze themselves into a home on 2 incomes, and then people get pregnant and act all surprised when they find out that EI only pays like $460 a week.
Yeah.
Hold on. Did you do any research before you decided to do this? So because I've always been self-employed, I never had EI as a backup. And so before I got pregnant, I had to have 6 months worth of expenses in the bank to cover my mat leave.
Yeah.
Right? And lots of people go into having children is a right. Having children is a privilege.
Yeah.
And if you are not taking your privilege seriously, then either you're going to have very unhappy children or you're going to be very unhappy parents.
That's fair. And I think, I mean, you raise a good point. I think a lot of people, they don't even think about the income loss. And I don't think a lot of people think about the cost of actually even having a kid. You know, obviously the costs of you know, clothing, food, but even childcare, you know, like that's another mortgage payment.
Yes.
Like
again, people say, but my childcare is as much as a mortgage payment. And I go, well, did you know that before you had a baby? Because you chose to have the baby. Okay, this is the thing, is that life is full of choices. And we choose based on what we consider to be our priorities.
Yeah.
So if your priority is having a child, maybe it's not having a child and a house at exactly the same time. Once upon a time, people didn't get into their own homes until they were in their late 30s or early 40s. That's when they had enough assets built up and enough of a credit history and all of that stuff going on that they would then qualify for a home. But lenders have gone the way of the credit score. Don't even get me started on the credit score, okay? Because I think the credit score is the single biggest problem in finance right now.
Why is that?
Well, the credit score wasn't created to adjudicate credit. The credit score was originally created to measure profitability. And the higher your profitability as a client, the higher your credit score. So if you made your minimum payment, had lots of credit available to you of various kinds, you had a great credit score. Okay? I have a crappy credit score. I own my own home. I have millions of dollars in the bank. I use my credit cards routinely, and I have a crappy credit score because I don't make my minimum payment. I don't have a line of credit or 37 other versions of credit. And so I come up with a really crappy credit score.
Interesting.
I mean, there was an online lender that I went and made an application for because I wanted to see how they worked, and I got turned down because they based it strictly on my credit score.
You're kidding me.
No. And I made huge fun of them online.
That's so funny. Unbelievable.
Yeah. But the thing is that your credit score, now that we're using credit scores for employment, for rental, for all kinds of things, it's not meant to be used for because it's a measure of profitability.
Interesting.
So that should tell you everything you need to know about it.
Yeah.
So I was around in the old days when financial institutions had their own credit scoring systems based on their credit application processing. Okay, and based on the input from the lender into the system would give you back a credit score. And that would tell the lender if you could lend to them or not. But they've all given that away. They're not doing that anymore. They're just using the traditional credit score, which is a shitty system. Sorry about the bad language.
That's fair. So if we are kind of going back to this idea of budgeting for your home, so then do you suggest that people factor in sort of, and I think that's the challenge. I mean, you're trying to budget for your lifestyle today, but also all these other costs 5 years down the road. I mean, do you, your income's going to be different. Like, I think it's hard for people. So, but do you still somehow suggest that they should at least start planning for those things before jumping into this big investment?
Well, the thing is that each of those things happens in its own time frame. And so what you want to do is you want to deal with each of them in the moment. And so if you're considering buying a home, I don't think looking 5 years down the road is going to help you a lot. Mostly because there are so many factors we do not know about that you can plan up the wazoo and still have everything, explode in your face.
Yeah.
Right? COVID is the perfect example of that.
Yeah.
So I think in the moment, but in the moment plan has to be a good one. The in the moment plan can't be on a wish and a prayer.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be based on hard numbers, and you have to have a great deal of confidence in it.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to decide how much you're spending. You can't let a lender decide how much you qualify for, because they will lend you all the rope you need to hang yourself as high as possible.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just bury that as a starting point.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out what you know you can afford to put into your budget.
Yeah.
Figure out the costs that will also go along with home ownership, like the maintenance and so on,
Mm-hmm.
but also your closing costs.
Yeah.
And are you going to stay in this? How long are you planning to stay in this home? If you're
Mm-hmm.
planning to stay in the home less than 5 years, you also have to figure out your in and out costs.
Yeah.
Because those are also quite expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. You know, I think, I can't remember what bank it was, but there was a survey they put out, you know, they're surveying recent home buyers about, you know, the cost of home ownership.
Yes.
And what they didn't budget for. And it was shocking. It was, I think, something like 80 or 90% of home buyers did not budget for the cost of property taxes.
Yes.
And something close to that did not budget for the cost of maintenance.
Yes.
Which,
and the thing is there's not a lack of information. You know, when we talk about financial literacy, because we like to throw that term around a lot, there is all kinds of information out there.
Yeah.
People choose not to search for that information because, again, it may conflict with their goal at the moment. And we are going to buy a house no matter what it takes. So, you know, this couple that I'm talking about, they're determined that they're going to be homeowners. They have 2 children. She wants another, and he makes $2,300 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and explain to me where you can buy a home anywhere with half of $2,300 a month.
Yeah. No.
Because you can't.
No, absolutely.
But the dream is strong, John. The dream is strong.
It's, you know what, I struggle with that a lot because, you know, I see it a lot. Like I see people who want to put the, you know, I had someone call me the other day and, you know, she's a family friend of ours and she asked me if she should buy a house and, you know, she's a single mom. Okay. Yeah. She works at TTC. And I know that like we had a past client who almost lost his job at TTC because TTC kind of started laying people off. And I said, listen, you need to be cautious, you know? And on top of that, she says to me, well, I was gonna buy the house with myself and my daughter because she's working, but she just lost her job, but someone told me they can get me a mortgage anyways. You know? I don't even know what to say. Like,
that's it. What do you say to that? You can't afford the home, but somebody's going to give you a mortgage anyway. Do you know they're going to charge you like 23% interest and they're going to take it back from you the minute you miss a moment?
Yeah.
Right? But people, that's the lack of perspicacity. You have to be able to look at the future and see the potentials.
And I have to be honest. Sometimes I feel like I'm in the wrong business because I can't just go along with their excitement.
Yes.
You know, because in my head, I'm
well,
like,
thank God.
Yeah. But it, like, you know, it's not, no, it's, and I do, and I appreciate, I think there are a lot of people who are just blinded by this and don't sit back and hit pause. And I think it is important to kind of think about these things. Now, you said something earlier that I thought was really interesting and I hadn't thought about, which is, you know, if you are planning on having kids, don't worry as much about that today, but you know, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, think about it before you obviously do it.
That's right. So that's the thing, is that we live in a world of ages and stages.
Yeah.
And we can't possibly predict what 3 years from now will look like. But if we think we want to have a baby 3 years from now, then a year before that, we have to start the plan.
Yeah.
The year before you're going to get pregnant, and for the year that you are pregnant, because you're pregnant for about 10 months, believe me, I puked every day, I know. Okay, so for that period of time, that's when you're putting the plans firmly into place. And that means living on your mat leave benefits for the year before, so you can stock up your maternity fund.
Yeah.
And if you can't live on your mat leave benefits before you have the baby, what makes you think you can live on your mat leave benefits after you have the baby?
So that's actually smart. You're basically suggesting doing the exact same trial run as you
Absolutely.
suggested before buying. Do the exact same thing before you have a kid.
Yes.
Work your finances, assuming you have a kid. Your
Yes.
income's down, your expenses are higher. What does that look like? I mean, if nothing else, it might delay the kid a bit, but
well, you might not be able to do the deed because you're so stressed.
yeah. But I do think it forces people to think about other options ahead of time.
You want to be dealing in reality.
Yeah.
So this is the thing, is that you have to be dealing in reality. If you are not dealing in reality, then you're delusional.
Yeah.
And we have medical terms for that. Mm-hmm. Okay, but we don't bring it down to the base. We think that only crazy people are delusional, and it's not true. Yeah. We have an entire population of people in Canada right now that are so delusional. Mm-hmm. They have worked themselves into so much debt. Yeah. They don't have any hope whatsoever ever paying it off.
Yeah.
Okay. And how is that not delusional?
Yeah, no, it is. And you're right. I mean, not thinking about what these costs are going to look like tomorrow doesn't make them go away.
That's right.
It actually just obviously leads to the stress that you've obviously kind of been helping with people with. And I do think that when you do it ahead of time, I think the one positive, what you're suggesting is when you do this trial, this practice,
yes,
you've got a clear head. So when it's not working,
yes,
you can at least think about, and maybe like the strategies are, you spend 15 grand and you fix your basement and you rent it and you're making $1,400 a month.
Yes.
And that brings you closer to, I think these are things to do,
But when even more than that, it's things like checking with all your friends to see who has babies that are 2 stages ahead of yours, so you can grab all their stuff after they're finished using it.
Yeah.
Okay. It's checking with your various parental units, mm-hmm. whatever they may look like, to see who will be able to take your kid on the day your kid gets sick and you have to go to work because you have a huge presentation to make.
Yeah.
So who's going to step into that void and take care of that problem on your behalf, mm-hmm. so that, you don't have to suffer that stress. It's about making those plans, putting that infrastructure in place. Yeah. So that come the worst, you have a plan. Can't be plan A. It's got to be plan B, C, D, and E.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Now, one thing that I find is that a lot of times, even the most prepared buyers who come in with plan A of, I want to spend X on a home.
Yes.
That X dollars all of a sudden becomes X plus 100,000 or plus 150,000 or plus 200,000.
Yes, because they fall in love with houses.
Was that?
They fall in love with houses.
Exactly. And yes. I do wonder, and I think spending on real estate, I feel, is a little bit different than spending it on shoes, yes. or something else. Because I feel like people are more vulnerable, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, like to rationalize it.
Yes, because they consider it to be good debt.
Yes.
So that's the first thing, is that it's good debt. Well, it's only good debt if you can afford it.
Yes.
So home ownership debt is good debt as long as it's manageable. The minute it becomes unmanageable, it now turns into bad debt.
Yeah.
And so if you need a second mortgage or a third mortgage, you're in terrible debt territory.
Yeah.
Okay, so that whole idea that we can rationalize spending more. So when I bought this house, I was just coming out of a separation. My husband and I had just separated. Our house would not sell for a year. It would take a year before it sold, but I needed somewhere for the children to be in the meantime. So I bought this house with a mortgage, but I had a 1-year mortgage with a plan to pay off the mortgage as soon as the house sold. Okay. I blew through my entire emergency fund in no time flat because there were things that I had to manage, like a separation agreement and the down payment on a house I wasn't planning to buy and all of this sort of stuff. But as soon as I got into this house, the first thing I did was go into retrench mode. Mm-hmm. I didn't buy stuff. I went with we're not spending a penny until my emergency fund is back in play. Okay. And the only concession I made was $100 in a jar in the cupboard for the kids to buy themselves food if I was away working.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only concession I made. Okay. Other than that, I went 4 years before I did the floors in the house. I hated the floors with a passion. They were laminate. They were mint and pink. Just to give you some context.
Yeah.
Okay. But I didn't do anything about it because I couldn't afford it yet.
Yeah.
I had lots of money in the bank, but that money was planned for something else. Like my retirement.
I think that is so what you're talking about, I find is hard for a lot of people to have that discipline.
Saying no to themselves is hard.
I think, and especially with their home, like I think there is this desire for it to be, you know, if not quite perfect, close to perfect from day one.
Yes.
Which is why obviously the homes that are the prettiest, the most renovated get 25 offers on them.
Yes.
You know, and the ones that aren't don't. And I do think it's hard for a lot of people to say, I'm going to live with the, what did you say? Peach and mint green.
Laminate flooring.
Laminate flooring.
Oh, it was just puke worthy.
Not a lot of people could do that for 4 years.
Well,
right?
You know what? It's just a floor.
I mean, yes, exactly.
It's all it is a floor. The minute you put down your good floor, it starts to scar.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you have to worry about your good floor. Okay, like this is such rubbish. So I lay a lot of this at the door of house porn.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, house porn has a lot to do with this.
Yeah.
And I say to people all the time, remember when you bought the home and it was beautiful, it was exactly what you wanted. You knew there were things that needed to be fixed. You knew there were things you were going to change. You would paint walls. You maybe knew you had to renovate a bathroom. It didn't matter. It was your house. Mm-hmm. And then you turned on the television. And suddenly you're comparing yourself to people who have marble floors and granite countertops and beautiful new kitchen cabinets. And all you want to do is get out of this house because there's a better house out there for you. Yeah. It's not, it's a place to live. Yeah. If it's dry and warm and cozy, that's all you need. You don't need all the fancy stuff.
Yeah.
I still only have laminate in my kitchen on my countertops. I would never replace it because it functions just fine. In fact, when I replaced it with more laminate.
Yeah. I think it is, you know, I grew up like that. My family was obviously kind of very not spending things right away. And one of my favorite real estate experiences got to be, I was helping a couple of clients who were looking at a home in Riverdale.
Oh, nice.
One of them decided to bring their mother with them to look at the house. And their mom's looking around the home, and the home is really nice. And she was just talking about how she can't believe how beautiful these homes are and how people are spending money, these beautiful kitchens, and she's looking at it in awe, right?
Yes.
About how new it is. And I find out, like, after the fact that his parents are ridiculously wealthy, like have something like 20 apartment buildings or something like that.
Yes.
But her home probably hadn't been renovated in 25 years.
She didn't need a renovated home. She was content with what she had. And this is probably at the very core of everything.
Yeah.
We do not look at what we have. We look at what we have not.
Yeah.
The fact that I have a home is a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Every now and then I get a little jealous of people that have more land than me. And then I think to myself, nope, I have enough. Because if I had any more, I'd have to spend more time weeding.
Yeah.
Right? So, you know, you need to put it in context of your life. If you have a very busy life, you can't afford to have a high maintenance abode, whatever it is. You need to have a very low maintenance abode so that it's not cutting into your very busy life elsewhere. Yeah. And if you have a home that requires a lot of attention, then you better make sure you have the time and the skills that you need. I have no skills, okay? I hung, my daughter managed to rip the door off one of the cupboards in the kitchen. She swore to God it wasn't her fault, but there I was with a door and a cupboard, Okay. And I rehung that door. I hung it wrong twice. The first time I hung it wrong, I hung it upside down. The second time I hung it wrong, it wouldn't close properly. I took it off and did it again.
Yeah.
Okay. I have no skills. So I make sure I have a great plumber. I have a great electrician. I refer to them as my sub-hubs, substitute husbands.
Okay.
And what I do is I put out a call, need this job done, sub-hub required. And some of my friends will send their husbands over to do it.
That's so funny.
Okay, so when I needed my new thermostat installed, I did not know how to install a thermostat. So a sub-hub came and installed it for me. So, and I repay them with cooking, or I repay them by doing something in return for them. Yeah. This is an exchange economy, man.
There you go. It's smart. You have to have a system to make it work for you. And if you're not going to be doing the stuff yourself, it's having someone handy who can kind of help you through it. That's
right.
So one thing I wanted to ask, so if we think about sort of when people do buy homes, right?
Yes.
Let's kind of think about sort of the one, sort of there's two situations, the people who plan and the people who didn't plan well.
Right.
And I'm kind of curious, out of the people maybe who did, do a decent budget, what are some of the common things that might derail them, that may have led them onto your show and financially stressed, even though they did a decent budget?
Well, part of it is I want it all and I want it all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I have long said you can have it all, but you can only have some things at some times. Over the long run, you can have it all, but you can't have it all at once.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to buy a home and have 2 kids and go back to school, things will not end well.
Yeah.
You have to sort of look at your life and decide, the ages and stages thing. Where am I? What is my number one priority? And how much emphasis am I going to put on that? And am I willing to let 2 and 3 go? And how long am I willing to let 2 and 3 go for?
Yeah.
Because if I'm a woman of a certain age, maybe having children is actually the number one priority. Because I'm afraid that when I decide to have children, I won't be able to.
I see.
Okay. So, but you have to prioritize. You have to decide the most important things to you. When I started the Money Masterclass in January, the first thing we did in January was figure out what our core values were.
Yeah.
Because you cannot possibly work towards goals if you don't know what your values are. And if your values will come into conflict with your goals if you haven't set your goals in consistency with your values. They will come into conflict, and your core values will then make you do stupid things.
Yeah. Okay.
So you'll say things like, I want to be able to spend more time with my family. That's really, really important to me. Well, then you should not have bought the house.
Interesting. Yeah. Why do you say, why do you say you shouldn't have bought a house?
Because you're spending more on home ownership than you actually can afford to. In other words, you have to keep doing the second job in order to keep the house. So your core values are coming into conflict with your reality.
Yeah.
Right? So you need to sit down and figure out what the most important thing, because there are loads of people that raise children in multi-generational settings or in apartment buildings or rental units, and don't take on the heavy duty responsibility of home ownership. So when the roof leaks, it's not their problem.
Yeah.
Right?
That's interesting. So basically, I mean, it's interesting the way you frame it around thinking about your core values. And I don't think people often think about things like that, because I think we do live in a very present,
instant gratification.
Yeah, 100%.
Yes.
I mean, where we want things now, and credit's cheap and available and we can have it now. But I see what you're saying. I do think that there's this tension between, like you want your house to look pretty and you want to have kids and they got to go to a date and you've got to do, and you want to go on vacation. Well,
and you want your kids to play every sport available. Hold on a second. Kids don't need to be in every sport available. Okay. It's like when you watch parents prep the nursery.
Yeah.
They're doing it for them.
Yeah.
They say they're doing it for the baby, but the baby doesn't care if it sleeps in a box.
Yeah.
Okay, you can open the bottom drawer of your chest of drawers, put some blankets and a pillow in there, and the baby can sleep there.
Yeah.
But parents want a nursery, and they want the nursery, and they want it to be beautiful, and they go out and they spend lots of money on things. I mean, honest to goodness, who needs a wiper warmer?
Yeah.
There is a thing called a wiper warmer.
Mm-hmm.
You take the wipe out of the box, you put it between your hands, and you hold it for 10 seconds. It warms up, and then you wipe the baby's bum. I don't understand what the wiper warmer is for. Okay?
That's so funny.
But as long as there are places to spend money, we'll be happy to give people our money.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because thinking about this concept of core values, their values, makes me think about that. You know, I think a lot of people think that most people who are vulnerable when making bad real estate decisions are first-time buyers, but I think upsizers are just as likely.
Absolutely.
And
I think, more so because they think they've earned it.
Yes, exactly.
And they hardly ever count the in and out costs as they're doing the upsize.
Yeah. And I remember it was kind of funny. It stood out to me because literally in the span of 1 week, it must have been like just after the peak of the market, I met with one couple who had kind of just rushed into buying a home. They wanted to upsize. They were both doctors. They made good money, but they were spent.
Yes.
You know, and you walk into the home 6 months later, there's no furniture.
Yes.
They're stressed.
Yes.
They need to sell it, but they can't get what the price they sold it for.
Yes.
And they just hadn't thought about why are they moving? Why are they spending this much more? How much more is it going to cost them per month?
Yes.
And literally the same week, I met with someone who's considering doing the same type of move.
Yes.
And he decided not to. And I was curious. I said, well, why did you decide not to upsize kind of the same price ranges, which was interesting? And he said, I thought about it. And I thought to myself, I got to spend $500,000 more to upsize my house, which is going to cost me $2,500 a month on my mortgage.
Yes.
And he said, and I thought about what am I getting for that? I'm getting an extra 100 square feet, a main floor powder room, and a TV room where I could watch the TV like this instead of sideways.
Yes.
Literally, that's exactly what he said.
Yes.
He's like, is it worth me paying $2,500 a month for the next 20 years for those three things?
Yes.
And I decided no. You know,
but that's the other thing is that people have huge spaces in their houses that they don't use.
Yeah.
They use them 4 or 5 times a year at the most.
Yeah.
That formal living room, dining room. So I don't know how much of my office you can see here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to turn this so you can see, okay?
Yeah.
This is originally the formal living room, dining room in my house.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like people that much. To save this much space for the occasional visitor, I don't like people that much.
Yeah.
So it became my office because I'm in here every day.
Yeah.
So all those people that have rooms with furniture nobody ever sits on, or, you know, it's like having the good dishes. It's the same idea. We don't have good dishes in my house. All the dishes are good dishes. We use them all. They break. We buy new dishes. Okay? It's like this idea that you have to save stuff.
Yeah.
It's so old in its thinking. You know, people need to, we use all the space in my house. Every square inch in my house is used.
That's smart.
Yeah.
So that's a really good tip in terms of thinking about, you know, our future financial decisions after we've bought.
Yes.
Now, what about people who screwed up?
They're in it now and they don't know what to do.
They're in it. Like, what do they do? You know, like, how do you, like,
Well, you can't Airbnb it anymore. Did you see him crying?
I mean, they can
this is I worked so hard for 4 years is gone.
They can maybe Airbnb a room, you know, but.
So the thing is that if you are in the mess, what I say to people is take a big breath and make some hard decisions. Maybe you have to sell. Maybe throwing money at this is not the solution to the problem. Maybe you have to sell and downsize.
Yeah.
Maybe you have to sell and rent. Maybe you can move into the basement, do something about, but now you're living in rental space that's dark.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe you move into the basement and you rent the upstairs because that's going to get you enough cash flow to make the move you need to move. So you're going to have to do that for a year or 2 years before you can make the move you need to do to get yourself out of hot water.
Yeah.
There are usually solutions. Sometimes there is no solution. Sometimes you just SOL.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes there are solutions if you think creatively. Maybe you take in a foreign student.
Yeah.
Someone that isn't going to run all over your house and yell and scream at midnight, because that's some of the things you get into when you have people come and live in your house.
Yeah.
Maybe you arrange for an elderly relative to sell their home and move in with you, and then pay you what would be the equivalent of rent for their keep,
Yeah.
while you figure out how you're going to manage the next 5 years as you transition.
Yeah.
If you think of life as a constant transition, like there is no stability,
Yeah.
okay? It's all about keeping the balls in the air.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think of life as a constant transition, it's just a matter of managing your resources and your circumstances while you're sitting on this square of the game.
Mm-hmm. 100%. That's interesting. Now, to what extent do you think people, I mean, you would know more than I would, just delay those, and you said those tough decisions, because
They
you
delay
have
them
to,
a lot. They delay them until they're a crisis. And that's the biggest mistake people make. Because until it becomes a crisis, you have options.
Yeah.
The minute it becomes a crisis, all your options have been taken away from you, and now you're just between a rock and a hard place.
Interesting. So if you're like,
I don't know the answer to this question. I can already tell what the question is, and I don't know the answer to this question.
Okay. My instinct, and I could be wrong. I can't say I'm in those situations as often as you are, but my instinct, in a lot of situations, maybe there's one person in the relationship that probably thinks they need to get help. The other one maybe doesn't.
Yes.
And who are you probably know but who do you turn to in that situation? Because I don't know who that is. Like, it's not a real estate agent. It's not.
The only person that I would advise anyone to go to is a fee-only financial planner.
Interesting. Yeah.
And that person has to have no affiliations with any companies.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have a very good reference.
I see.
And that first interview that you do with them, I recommend very strongly that you treat it as an interview. You fire a lot of really hard questions at them.
Yeah.
Because you want to see how they respond to those really hard questions. And if they don't respond well, or they take umbrage at the questions that you're asking, they're not for you.
Yeah. Interesting. So that's basically a financial planner who charges like a flat fee for their service.
Absolutely. And you get what you pay for.
Yeah. And it's interesting.
Except with me, because everybody gets the best of me and they don't have to pay a penny. Except to the food bank. Everybody remember to go and do your food bank thing.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I think even that could be a barrier for people. Like, if you're financially strained, even the idea of spending money to get out of it can be, I would imagine, a hurdle for some
Except
people.
It's short-sighted. It's
100%. Yes.
So I'll give you another example. I had a woman call me the other day. She's about 74 years old, and she was quizzing me on executors. Who should she name as the executor of her will, of her estate?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, get a corporate executor.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, what? Why would I let some stranger have 4% of my estate? And I said, would you sell your own house? And she looked at me, well, no. I said, same diff. If you don't want your executive to get all your money, make sure all your beneficiaries are filled out properly, okay? Yeah. Make sure as little passes through the estate as possible. But it's short-sighted to think I'm going to save this money by not hiring the expert, especially when the expert has skills you will never have.
Yeah.
Okay?
100%.
Yeah.
That's very smart. So we're almost at the end of our time today. Now, before we finish up, I had two last questions, but before I ask them, maybe I thought is there anything else you think that's important to talk about that we didn't touch on, maybe that I missed? Or
the only thing I will say is that very often when people invest a lot in external aspects of their life instead of internal aspects of their life, it usually boils down to a low self-esteem. If I need a very fancy car, It's because I need the car to say something about me that I'm not willing to say about myself. So that's why I drive an old Dodge, okay? Because I don't need my car to say anything about me. I need a very fancy house to live in. It's because I don't have enough to say about myself, and I don't have enough of a sense of self-worth. So I need other people to admire me. So self-worth is tied into this in a very complicated way. And I encourage people who use a lot of external things to make them feel good to look at what it is that's wrong, because those external things, the price just keeps going up. So there's no way to ever win.
I think, I think what you're saying is super important. And I think it's very hard today, like arguably harder than what it was, 10 years ago, like with platforms like, all these platforms like Instagram, all these things.
Yes.
I'm not that active on those types of, but a lot of it is really about how fantastic everyone's life is.
That's right. That's right.
And it was in it, and I think it's fake, and
it totally is fake. So when I was a child, see how I sat up automatically with this one? This one's important. When I was a child, my favorite aunt wrote in my autograph book, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as night the day, thou canst not be false to any man. And I stay as true to myself as I possibly can. And that's why I come across as a real person, because I am in fact a real person. I don't have a facade. Okay. When you see me, you get exactly what you see. I do not dress fancy. I do not speak fancy, except for perspicacious, which is my favorite word. It's about being the true me. And if people can find at their core what they're happy with, if they love themselves, all this extraneous stuff, it just goes away. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. I agree 100%.
Okay, what are your last two questions?
Okay, last two questions. First one, the theme for our conference this year is smart caution.
Yes.
And I'm curious what that means to you.
Well, that's the perspicacity that I'm talking about. That's the taking the time to think of all the things that can go wrong. So that you have a plan in place to deal with them. And you won't get them all. It's impossible to think you will always get them all. But if you take the time to think them through, Victoria Rice and I wrote a book together called The CEO of Everything. And we went through all the things that can go wrong as you are moving through this stage of new singularity, whether you're divorced or widowed, because it's important. People can't think of them themselves. So go sit with friends and talk about this stuff. And don't talk about it braggadociously, as in, I just got a 25% raise, or did you see the new car I have? Talk about it really, as in, I cannot figure out how to get my grocery bill below this amount. Like, I've been struggling with this for weeks and weeks and weeks. But with 3 teenage sons, how do I get my grocery bill? And listen to what other people say. They will have great ideas that you can use. Yeah,
that's fantastic advice. And our last question, being a real estate centric conference, of course, the last one is, would you buy or sell a home right now?
I don't know. If I was buying a home to live in for the next 10 years, it makes no difference when you buy. If you're buying a home to live in, then go ahead and do it. But know that you're staying put. And this is a home. It's not an accessory that you're using to show everybody how great you are. In terms of selling, I don't think I'd want people in my house right now. I don't want all those people traipsing in and out of my house. I don't know where else they've been.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Gail, thank you so much again for taking the time.
My pleasure.
I think everyone got some great tips and feedback from you today. So thank you so much.
Thanks for doing this.